Rain, compelling circumstances EAD. Have you done any of the compelling circumstances EADs before?
Yeah, and so in 2020, kind of March, once COVID really hit hard, this was used. I mean, I was on conversations almost all day for a few weeks, getting people set up for these compelling circumstance EADs. The whole purpose back then was to provide a protection from unlawful presence. Now, when we first started, that's what it was all about. Just keep me protected while I can stay here in the country, with the hope that the work authorization is going to be approved at the end. I would say 95% of the cases we handled, they did get the work authorization in the end, but the principal purpose right now is just keeping you here safe in the country without accruing any unlawful presence.
So let's say I got laid off from Meta company right now, and I'm nearing the 60 days. So can I apply for the compelling circumstances EAD?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as long as you are in an H-1, L-1, O-1, E3 status, or like Rahul said, a period of authorized stay, you can file the EAD as long as, I would say, someone in your family, it should be either the husband or the wife, has an I-140 approval. You should be able to file.
So to apply for the compelling circumstances, somebody must be having an I-140. Either me or my spouse must have an I-140.
And the priority date cannot be current.
Oh, well, of course. So
Yeah.
final action date is not current. Yeah. And what about my wife? If I have an I-140 and I got laid off with Meta and I get an EAD under the compelling circumstances, what about my wife?
We would also need to file for her, maybe with your case, but she would also be getting the EAD. And if you have any kids as well, they can get the EADs. You might not want to be having the 12-year-old go to work, but conceptually, yeah, you could get them the EAD. Same for maybe the 16 to 18-year-old kid as well.
So what is the compelling circumstances that you have used in 2020 when people got laid off in the COVID period?
The facts for COVID are going to be a little bit different, but essentially the argument is the same. So just to give you a quick idea of what COVID was, we had the border shutdowns, people were getting laid off overnight. We just simply couldn't travel to get the visa stamps, and of course all the craziness that came with COVID. That was the compelling circumstance that we were arguing back then. Now the same sort of applies. We have difficulties getting the visa interviews, but generally we're arguing that I've been laid off. My family is going to suffer some substantial harm because of that layoff, and so we're now asking the government, hey, give us some time to either keep working with this EAD so that we can find the next visa option, or give us enough time that we can wrap up all our affairs so that we can depart the country.
So for example, selling the car, selling the house, is that a compelling circumstances?
Yeah, exactly. And so just to give a brief idea, we call that economic loss. It's going to be economic loss to people who are giving you the credit, lending you the car, lending you the mortgage, those things, as well as you're losing all those sort of assets. You're losing your house, you're losing your car.
What about my child is in center of the school? I mean, the academic year ends in June, and now you're telling me to leave because 60 days are ending. Can I use that as a compelling circumstances?
Yes.
So how long does it take for the compelling circumstances EAD once we file?
So really the most important thing that I would tell any client who comes to me to talk about the EAD is that principally it's about protecting you from unlawful presence. And so we would file today, and it might take a year for this EAD to be approved. But during that time, while the case is pending.
But sometimes it might take only 3 months too to get the EAD approval. So while this EAD is pending, they can stay in the United States.
Absolutely.
Can they work while the EAD is pending?
I would tell you do not work until either the EAD is approved, or if you can show me some other sort of work authorization that you might have. But I would likely say that you need to stop working until that EAD comes.
Okay, let's say it's taking approximately 4 months for me to get an EAD, and I stop working, and I already crossed the 60 days. What if I get a job? Can I move to H-1B?
So you're outside the 60 days now?
Outside the 60 days, filed an EAD is pending, and it's not approved. Can I move back to H-1B?
You would likely need to go for stamping.
So then they cannot file the change of status from this application to that.
That's one of the most important things about this compelling circumstance EAD. Most importantly, it's going to provide you protection from unlawful presence, but it's never going to give you status. And so if you file for the EAD, if you're approved for the EAD, that's great. It protects you from the unlawful presence, but it's never going to give you the status, meaning you can't do the 485 if your date comes current. If you find another H-1B employer, you can't just put in your I-129 in the mail and they approve it. You're going to need to go for the stamping.
Okay, so it's not a big deal. Let's say, for example, I filed the EAD, I get an EAD, I started working for the company, and I can't change the status to H-1B, but you're telling I can get the H-1B and go to India and get the stamping.
Absolutely.
So this may be very useful for a lot of people, especially if you get laid off, you don't have a job, and you may want to consider to use the compelling circumstances EAD. File it, you will be in legal status. Once you get the EAD, you can start working for any company, and then you can get a H-1B. But the only problem is you will have to go to India or any other country to get the stamping and come back. That's the only hitch that we have. Now, can we extend how long this EAD is valid?
The EAD is going to be good for a year from the date of approval. So say you applied today and it takes 4 months. That doesn't mean the approval is now 8 months long. It's going to be a year from the date of approval. You're also allowed to request an extension of the EAD within 6 months of it expiring. You have to still claim some sort of compelling circumstance. It doesn't have to be the same circumstance as you maybe argued or presented in your first petition, but there does need to be some sort of compelling circumstance that we can argue when we're going for that extension a year, down the road.
People are asking questions. Reverend Reddy is asking question. Does the I-140 has to be approved with the current employer, or could it be from the previous employer? It could be from the previous employer. It doesn't have to be from the current employer.
Correct.
It could be from any previous employer, your I-140. And Reverend, it's I-140 doesn't have to be only yours. It could also be your spouse's I-140 also. Even though she's an H-4, you can still apply for the compelling circumstances EAD. How could you help Ryan in compelling circumstances EAD? People, how can they contact you?
So there should be a form, I think, in the comments here on the video, or you can contact us, Reddy.
Yeah, there is a link there provided in the video there. You can fill the information out. We ask the basic information about you, your spouse, when is your I-140 approved, and the date you got laid off. And we will then send you links for the Zoom, because a lot of people are in these circumstances. They want to know more questions. So we are going to conduct Zoom conference calls for these people weekly, at least 2 times, so that we can address the issues of the EAD, of the compelling circumstances EAD. So you need to go to that link that we are providing it to you, and you need to fill that basic information that we are asking. Your name, your spouse name, your email address, phone number, when was your I-140 approved, when did you got laid off. These are very important information we needed for us to file the EAD. Then we will have a Zoom calls with Ryan or me, or in some cases, both of us will be there. And once we feel that you're fit for it, then we will, of course, charge you money to file the EAD. And when we file the EAD, we'll file the EAD for you, we'll file the EAD for your spouse. And if your children wants to file an EAD, they can file for EAD too. Now, unlike H-4 EAD, it's only available for only spouse, this compelling circumstances EAD is available for the children also. Normally, what's the turnaround time if you decided that, okay, this person beats the compelling circumstances? What time does it take for you to file the EAD application?
I would want us to have a 15-20-minute conversation so that you can just give me a little bit of background about your specific case, but it shouldn't take us more than 48 hours, 72 hours to get the case filed. No.
Should the case be filed within 60 days after they get laid off?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you get laid off today, you've got 2 months to file it. If you got laid off 1 month and 29 days ago, you need to call one of us today, because you're going to be outside the 60 limit come tomorrow.
So we did provide the link for you guys. It's a very basic link that you need to use our services. It's free. You don't have to pay any money, and we'll also invite you for Zoom conferences where we'll address any specific questions you may have. But as Rena has pointed out, there are a couple of important things to note down. You or your spouse must have an I-140 approval. You must have been laid off in the past 60 days. And the compelling circumstances, what Rena said is that financial loss, if you have to sell your house, may be considered into it. You have to sell your car to leave the country. Children leaving the school and going to India at this point of time in the middle of the calendar year should be considered as a compelling circumstances to file for the EAD. Ryan has filed several of those things in 2020 at the COVID era. At that time, it was quite a different time than that right now. USCIS is encouraging, has also put notice that if you got laid off, could you use the compelling circumstances EAD? Is this compelling circumstances EAD new? A lot of people are saying, how come we didn't know?
It's not new. I think it came through in 2018. When it first came through, we all kind of looked at it thinking like, this is kind of silly. You're not going to be served the way you might think you're being served by this EAD. But then COVID happened, and then we're seeing these mass layoffs happen. And so this is maybe looking at the legislative intent, maybe this is what it was created for, is these sort of stopgap measures. And I want to make one point. I don't know if Rahul will agree with me entirely, but there's a lot of things that this current administration is putting out sort of as saying implicitly, kind of with a wink wink, that we're going to be friendly towards you as the alien, as the immigrant. I think a lot of people are seeing this posting on USCIS's website, calling it a stopgap, compelling circumstances EAD. I think this is the government's way of saying, wink, wink, if you file this, no, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but if you file this, we're likely going to give you this EAD because we're recognizing the harm that it's going to cause, one, to these families as well as the American economy.
So 60 days, within 60 days, you need to file an EAD. You must have an I-140 approval. Once you file, you can stay legally in the United States, but you cannot work
Or travel.
Or travel. And another small important thing that you need to know is, if the application is pending or if the EAD is approved, you want to change back to the H-1B status, though, you will have to go outside the country to get the stamping. That is a caveat there that you need to understand. Anything else?
No.
Thank you. You can contact us by filling out the link that we provided there. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.